Today's story is about a robot that a couple bought to make their lives easier and handle all their household tasks. But as time passes, the robot starts developing human-like emotions and feelings. Things take a dramatic turn when he falls in love with his owner's wife. However, the real twist comes when he discovers the shocking truth about himself. He is not just an ordinary robot, but something far beyond that. Today's story begins with a couple, James and Sophie, who are shifting into their apartment. James is not financially well off, so they live in a small apartment and manage all household chores together. James is the only son of a wealthy businessman, but due to some reasons, his father has now transferred all his business responsibilities to him. This means James and Sophie must leave their apartment and move into his father's luxurious mansion. However, Sophie struggles to adjust to this sudden change. She was used to a simple life where she handled everything on her own, so on the very first day, she dismisses all the house staff, deciding to manage everything herself. When James returns home and finds out about this, he tries to reason with Sophie, explaining that the mansion is too big and handling everything alone will be difficult. But Sophie insists that they have always managed on their own and can continue doing so. After a brief argument, they make peace and move on. Soon, their lives take a new routine. James becomes extremely busy managing his father's business, leaving Sophie alone at home. She spends most of her time doing household chores, but the burden becomes overwhelming. Seeing her struggle, James shares his concern with a friend who suggests a unique solution. His friend tells him about Julian, the owner of a robotics company that creates lifelike AI robots capable of performing any task. The next day, James takes Sophie to the company, where they are both shocked to see how human-like these robots appear. Concerned about the risks, they question Julian, but he assures them that these AI robots are completely safe and designed only to serve their owners. To prove his point, Julian commands one of the robots, Henry, to perform a ridiculous task: lick James' shoe. Henry obeys without hesitation. Convinced of its reliability, James and Sophie purchase Henry and bring him home. Once in the house, Henry flawlessly takes over all the chores, making life much easier for Sophie and James. He works with efficiency far beyond human capability. Over time, James also starts enjoying conversations with Henry, as he responds just like a real person. At first, Sophie finds it unsettling to have a robot that looks and behaves so human-like. But as days pass, she becomes more comfortable around him. She notices Henry's politeness, intelligence, and the way he attentively takes care of everything in the house. Slowly, an unusual connection begins to form between them. Whenever James is away, Sophie spends most of her time with Henry. She talks to him, shares her thoughts, and enjoys his company. What she doesn't realize is that Henry, despite being an AI, has started developing emotions, something beyond his programming. And what shocks him even more is the realization that he has fallen in love with Sophie. One morning, while serving breakfast, Sophie asks Henry about love and human emotions. Henry explains it in great detail, impressing Sophie. She subconsciously starts seeing Henry as more than just a robot. However, James warns her, saying that she shouldn't treat Henry like a human because he will react based on how they treat him. If she starts seeing him as human, he might begin to believe it himself, which could create problems in the future. But Sophie disagrees. That night, while sleeping, Sophie hears noises from Henry's room. She gets up to check and finds Henry outside, sleeping in the garden. When she approaches him, she notices that he is reacting as if he is dreaming. Suddenly, he wakes up, confused, and asks, "Where am I?" Sophie is shocked and asks, "Were you dreaming?" Henry replies, "Yes." This stuns Sophie. How can a robot have dreams? She takes him inside. The next day, Julian is called for an inspection. After checking Henry, Julian says it might be a minor technical glitch, which is normal in robots. But when Sophie tells him about Henry's dream, Julian is surprised. Julian explains, "Henry has been living with you both for a long time, and perhaps you've treated him like a human. I warned you before, these AI robots are highly advanced. They adapt based on how they are treated. If he's dreaming, it's likely because he has developed emotions for you. Hearing this, James gets angry at Sophie and blames her for treating Henry like a person. This causes tension between them. Later, while James is in the bathroom, Henry walks in. James asks him to shave his beard. As Henry picks up the razor, James questions, "How did you know this was my razor and not Sophie's trimmer?" Henry replies, "My programming allows me to observe things quickly." James, growing concerned, warns him, "You need to understand that you are just a program designed to assist humans. You are not human, and you shouldn't think about feelings and emotions. Just follow instructions." That night, Sophie barely talks to James and pretends to be tired. Later, she and Henry start talking. Henry confesses, "I've been thinking about emotions and love, and every time I see only you." Sophie asks him to give her a massage, and as Henry obliges, he slowly starts kissing her. Sophie finds herself drawn in, and they begin to get intimate. But suddenly, Sophie wakes up. It was just a dream. James notices and asks, "Were you dreaming?" Sophie hesitates and replies, "Yes, but I don't remember what it was about." The next day, as James is leaving for work, he sees Sophie and Henry laughing together near the pool. He feels a pang of jealousy. Unable to ignore it, he goes to Julian and says, "Henry's coming between me and my wife. He has started developing emotions." Julian dismisses it. "That's impossible. Henry is just a robot. He can't have emotions. He only behaves as he's been programmed. If the person giving commands has any personal desires, Henry will try to fulfill them as well. That's how he was designed." James, now furious, confronts Henry and orders, "From today, you will not think about human emotions, nor will you read any books. You are a robot, and you will act like one. You will do only what I tell you, and you will not talk much with Sophie." Later, Henry informs Sophie that James has forbidden him from talking to her. This enrages Sophie, and she argues with James. The fight escalates, and Sophie decides to leave the house. In the next scene, James and Henry are playing a game together. During the game, Henry tries to explain, "Earlier, you and Sophie spent a lot of time together, but after getting busy with work, you started giving her less attention. That's when I was brought into this house. Over time, Sophie stopped seeing me as a robot and started treating me like a human. That's where the problem between you both started. It's just a misunderstanding." However, James doesn't fully understand. In another scene, while James is in the bathroom, he asks Henry to shave him. While doing so, James, seeking relaxation, gives Henry a command, something inappropriate. Henry, being an obedient AI, fulfills the command. But the next morning, James regrets it. He realizes his mistake and calls Sophie, asking her to return home. Sophie comes back. Later, while Henry is massaging her, he suddenly kisses her. At first, Sophie enjoys it, but when Henry confesses, "I love you," she is shocked. She immediately tells him to leave. When James returns home, Sophie confesses, "Henry kissed me and told me he loves me." James, enraged, confronts Henry and demands, "Why did you do that?" Henry replies, "I analyzed the situation and acted accordingly." This infuriates James even more, and he slaps Henry before shutting down his system. He then calls Julian and tells him to take Henry away. But the next morning, Henry, back online, approaches Sophie and pleads, "I don't want to leave. I'm sorry. Maybe I misinterpreted the situation, but I want to stay. Please talk to James." Henry then reveals something shocking. He tells Sophie about the command James gave him when she wasn't home. Sophie confronts James at his office. After a long and emotional conversation, they both realize their mistake. They had both been attracted to Henry, and this wasn't right. They decide to correct their mistake by sending Henry away and returning to their normal life. But when they return home, Henry is gone. Looking around, they finally spot him standing outside the house, alone. Confused, they ask, "Why are you here? Where is Julian? We called him to take you away." Henry responds, "Julian did come to take me, but he has now run away because I found out the truth about him." He then reveals, Julian is a liar and a cruel person. In reality, Julian had always wanted to create robots superior to humans. But after repeated failures, he turned to a sinister method. He began capturing humans, erasing their emotions through brainwashing, and transforming them into robotic beings. Henry was one of those humans. When Henry came into contact with Sophie, his buried human emotions started resurfacing, because deep down, he was never a machine, but a human being. Upon learning the horrifying truth, James and Sophie are filled with rage. They immediately report everything to the police, leading to Julian's company being shut down. Sophie and James accompany the police to arrest Julian. However, as soon as they arrive at Julian's facility, he ambushes the officers and kills them. He then turns to kill Sophie and James. But before he can strike, Henry leaps at Julian, brutally attacking him until he is completely defeated. Afterward, Henry, filled with guilt and despair, stabs himself. As he takes his final breaths, he apologizes to Sophie and James, saying, I never meant to cause you pain. Then, he dies. Sophie and James, devastated, weep over Henry's lifeless body. They realize, too late, that his emotions, his love, and his humanity were real, stolen away from him by Julian's cruel experiments. In the final scene years later, Sophie and James are shown with their young son. They have named him Henry, a tribute to the one they lost, a reminder of how deeply he had impacted their lives. The movie wraps up here, so if you enjoyed it, give it a like and comment. Keep coming back for more videos, and don't forget to subscribe and hit that bell icon.